if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now, without further ado, let's go. Here is my story. I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship when I, a 34-year-old male, met my wife, who was 35. It hadn't been a traumatic breakup. The two of us were just growing apart and wanted different things out of life. So, we decided it was better to break up. A few months after that breakup, I bumped into a woman who introduced herself as Katie. We just started talking in a coffee shop and hit it off. When we exchanged numbers, I did warn her that I had just gotten out of a serious relationship, which meant I wasn't ready for anything serious or anything at all. She waited until I was ready, which was pretty amazing for me. I thought that a woman willing to wait for me must have interested me, right? It ended up not being the case, but at the time, it truly did seem like I found someone good for me. We took it slow. And within a year and a half, the two of us were moving in together. After another 6 months, I proposed, and we were planning a wedding. The wedding went off without a hitch. The two of us were financially stable at the time of our wedding. I had a decent job, and so did my wife. While we might not have been as rich as the 1%, the two of us could be considered middle class at the very least. Our relationship was also good. We had our ups and downs, but the two of us truly did seem to be creating a great life together. For the first 3 years, everything seemed great until my wife started working on a particular project at work that was difficult. Or this was what I thought at the time. She was working long hours and just spending a lot of time out of the house. I missed her, and when I understood that she was busy at work, when I had an important project at work, she supported me. I kept asking when she would be finished, but my wife kept extending the deadline. This has been going on for nearly 6 months now. It made no sense why she would still be spending all these late nights at work. It got to the point where I couldn't deny that something wasn't right there. So, I went onto her laptop that she had brought home from work. Her home laptop didn't have anything. I already checked. This meant the evidence had to be there. I didn't know what evidence I was looking for, but I knew there had to be something on her laptop that would explain to me what was going on. On her laptop, I found several emails from an email account I didn't even know she had. On this email were dozens of emails that were shared between this unknown man. They were all of a romantic or sexual nature, which only confirms the truth that I was afraid to admit to myself. She was cheating on me. When she came back home from picking up dinner for us, I had the laptop out in the open with the emails right there, so she could see that I knew everything. My wife didn't say anything at first. She looked like she was in shock. So, I took the chance to ask her who was the guy she was cheating with. My wife screamed, saying I had no right to go into her work laptop because that contained confidential information. I almost wanted to laugh because she had been the one to use her work laptop to talk with this guy. So, I asked again. He was a former client of the office that she had continued speaking to even after the contract ended. One thing led to another, and they started sleeping together. I asked if she had feelings for him. She said yes. My wife said she was going to eventually tell me that she wanted a divorce so she could move on and be with this man. Once I did a little digging, I discovered this man was very rich. When I say rich, I mean filthy stinking rich. She always loved the finer things in life but seemed like she wanted to work towards it. I couldn't understand the shift in her personality. Maybe it had always been there. And I was so blinded by my love for her that I just wasn't able to see it. Whatever the reason, I knew this marriage was over. My wife fought it for a bit, but I think she was only doing this because she felt like it was what she had to do. The divorce seemed to take a long time to come to fruition, but in reality, it was just a matter of months. She went one way and I went another. A divorce never was on my radar, yet here I was newly divorced and alone. My ex-wife already had someone in mind. She posted on social media that she was with a new man and they were engaged to be married. The truth of it was that her so-called fiancé was already married. He told her he was a widow but his wife wasn't dead. Rather, she was just in another country taking care of an ailing family member. When she returned, everything hit the fan, so to speak. My ex-wife's engagement was called off, but this was a moot point given that her AP was already married. They couldn't get married anyway. After that, her social media posts seemed to become quite erratic. She was posting about how she had lost her soulmate. But what I think she was upset losing was her wealthy AP. It was all about the money. This guy was going to help her get to that lifestyle much faster. Meanwhile, after my divorce, I reconnected with the girl from the past whom I had originally cut things off with just before meeting Katie. The two of us were friends for a while before we realized that we were finally in a place where we could give this a second try. She knew about my divorce and was sympathetic. When word got back to my ex that I was back with this particular woman, she went ballistic and started blasting me all over social media. She spent so much time blasting me and her AP over all her social media that her job started to become in jeopardy from what I heard. My wife was put on probation at her place of work. They were a public company, so things she could post could be used against them in some way. I just chose to shut down my social media for the time being because reading her posts was doing nothing but causing stress for me. As far as I know, she has been moved to another department and isn't making as much money as she once was. This is all on my ex. If she had just been happy for what she had, then all of that could have been prevented. My current girlfriend and I are talking about marriage but are trying to take it very slow right now. The last thing I want to do is run into anything without being completely sure. Don't want to make the same mistake twice. Opus, it's almost poetic to think that you ended up in a relationship with the girlfriend you were with all those years ago. It's a shame that you had to go through your ex cheating on you followed by divorce to get back to her. No one should have to go through that. Your ex truly is a piece of work. She's lucky that she didn't lose her job completely for having a relationship with a former client and using her work computer, no less. In my opinion, they should have fired her the second they found out about it. However, again, this is just my opinion. It's almost laughable that her relationship with the affair partner turned out the way it did. What did she expect from someone willing to sleep with a married woman? I imagine most people with any sense aren't going to be surprised he was lying the entire time, just like your ex was. Good on you for moving on and taking it slow with your new girlfriend. It seems like the two of you have something special. Of course, things could change, but this is the point of taking it slow, to make sure no mistakes are made, as you mentioned at the end of your post. Now for our next story. I, a 49-year-old male. Story 2. Met my wife, a 49-year-old female, when we were in our mid-22nd. We were friends for a while before we decided to date. The two of us dated for around a year, which isn't that long in the grand scheme of things, but at the time, it seemed like we had been dating long enough. She mentioned us getting married, and I said I wanted to wait a little longer. Within a few months, I finally was ready to propose to my then-girlfriend. She accepted, and the two of us started planning a wedding. It was around this point I should have recognized the red flags, but I didn't. Why? Well, I was in love. See, my fiancé wanted a huge wedding. While I understand it was a special experience, I didn't see the point of spending a couple grand on what was essentially one day. I ended up convincing her to have a small, intimate ceremony. She seemed all right with it at the time, but I think as the months and years went by, she almost started to resent me for talking her into that. The thing is, we couldn't have afforded such a wedding at the time. I suggested that one day we could have the wedding of her dreams if we decided to renew our vows. This seemed to please her, but again, I felt like this resentment was always there, just lingering beneath the surface. Was I the most romantic guy in the world? No, but I tried hard to keep the romance alive by doing little things for her over the years. And it wasn't like my wife didn't know this. When we got married, we also didn't have kids, so there wasn't that pressure hanging over us. The years passed, and by the time we were in our 42nds, we had been married for almost 2 decades. Things had gotten stale for the past year or so, which led me to plan a romantic night out. I even asked my sister for help because, like I said, I wasn't very romantic. It ended up not going anywhere. My wife never came home that night. And when she did, she said that she had stayed at a friend's house. They had been drinking, so she figured it was safer for her to just spend the night there. I saw no reason to not believe her, so I took her at her word. The next night, I tried again, and we had a pleasant dinner. When I tried to initiate intimacy, she brushed me off, saying she was too tired. Again, I didn't think too much of it. We both worked a lot, which was why we were finally able to afford the lifestyle we were currently living. This trend continued, and it got to the point where I had to ask myself if I was going to continue to believe her stupid lies, which were lies. I reached out to her friends to see if she was there, but they covered for her. I shouldn't have been surprised. The only way I could think was to directly confront her about her lies and ask her if she was cheating. To my surprise, she admitted everything the night I confronted her. I think I was in shock that she just straight up told me that she was cheating. Honestly, I don't know what I was expecting. I think I thought she might try to deny it and tell me that I was wrong, but she didn't do any of that. So, I asked who it was and how long it had been going on. He was a family member of one of her friends she met one day. It was an instant attraction, and he was so romantic. There it was, the one thing that I could never manage to do. I did try, but my wife didn't think that I was trying hard enough. This guy was everything I wasn't and more. She claimed our marriage ended that night. And what began was the divorce process. It wasn't a bitter divorce. We agreed to split everything down the middle. The house would be sold, and we each take half. This seemed like the best option for us to get away from each other quickly. Once everything was final, I bought a condo with the money we split from the joint account. I still had a decent amount left over that I was going to keep for a nest egg. Eventually, the house sold, and I put that money away as well. You never knew when you were going to need it. My ex ended up doing the exact opposite. She took her money and bought an even bigger house than the one we lived in together. Then I heard that she was planning a wedding. A very huge wedding, I might add. It was the wedding she had always wanted. I was having flashbacks to the wedding we had all those years ago. My ex had resented me for all these years because we never had the wedding she truly wanted. As embarrassing as it is to admit, I did look at the pictures on Facebook afterward, and my God, it was a huge affair. Everything looked so expensive. I can just imagine how much money she spent on the whole thing, including the dress. At that point, I knew I had to take a step back and stop obsessing over this woman who was my ex. I focused on spending time with my friends and family, which helped. I assumed my ex was spending time with her new affair partner. Turns out, though, not everything was great. I learned that a year after they got married, they were in debt. My ex spent the divorce settlement on the expensive house and expensive wedding, making it so she had nothing left. Her job did bring in a decent amount of income. My ex was the only one making good money in that household because the affair partner was a bum. She dared to reach out to me to see if I could lend her some money. My ex played on our past relationship and the memories we made over 2 decades, but I wasn't buying it. I told her that it wasn't my problem that she spent all of her divorce settlement on pointless crap. I hung up on her and proceeded to receive at least 3 more calls from her that night, along with 3 very nasty voicemails. After I listened to them, I just laughed and played them to my friends to show how far she had fallen. They all found them as funny as I did. My ex truly had no shame or was just that desperate. I don't know if she ever truly believed that I would give her the money or not. Even if she had reached out to me a few months prior, I still wouldn't have given it to her. At no point was I ever that desperate. I blocked her number that night because I didn't want to hear another word from her. We were done. She cheated and wanted to go be with her affair partner, who was the new love of her life. If she had planned better, then my ex would have money just like I still did. Most of my family and friends were happy to see her go. I wonder if they had ever liked her or just tried to get along with her for my sake. It didn't matter anymore, though, because my ex was a part of my past, and that was where she was going to stay. Opus, you made the right decision all those years ago not to have an expensive wedding. It's only one day out of your entire life. It's not to say that you can't make it special, but rent a wedding dress, don't get a hugely expensive venue, and make it a nice and small intimate affair. The one thing I'll give your ex is that she did own up to it right away. It doesn't change the fact that she never should have cheated on you in the first place, but at least she didn't continue to lie even when the evidence was right there. It's quite ironic that your ex was finally able to plan the wedding of her dreams, but it ended up being what was truly her downfall. She probably realizes now that it was a bad choice to waste all that money, not only on a huge house she probably didn't need, but a huge wedding. To think she reached out to you for money means she must have been desperate. Good on you for shutting it down and leaving her to deal with the consequences. She made her bed of debt, and now she is going to have to lie in it with her bum of a husband. If you liked it, please support us with a like as well as subscribe to our channel. Write in the comments what you think about the story. Thank you for being here with us.
Let's begin. They say life can change in the blink of an eye. I never fully understood that until the morning I stumbled across the truth. It was supposed to be an ordinary Saturday. I woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside, the sunlight streaming through the curtains, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee wafting from the kitchen. Selena always made coffee first thing in the morning, a habit she claimed helped her feel human before tackling her hectic day. As I walked into the kitchen, there she was, standing by the counter with her phone in one hand and her coffee mug in the other. Her hair was still damp from the shower, and she looked calm, almost too calm. She greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and I thought, what a perfect picture of normalcy. But normalcy can be a facade. And that morning, I was about to find out just how deep her deception ran. I had no idea what I was looking for when I walked into the master bathroom later that day. It started with something simple. Tidying up, I pulled the trash can out from under the sink, intending to empty it. That's when I saw it, half hidden beneath crumpled tissues and an empty bottle of shampoo. A pregnancy test. The pink plastic cap caught my eye first. At first, I thought nothing of it, but then curiosity got the better of me. When I pulled it out, my breath hitched. There they were, 2 unmistakable pink lines. Positive. My chest tightened as the realization hit me. Selena hadn't told me anything about this, and for good reason. We hadn't been intimate in months. My hands trembled as I turned the test over, searching for an explanation that wouldn't come. The walls of our bathroom seemed to close in around me, the air heavy with a truth I wasn't ready to face. I spent the next few minutes standing in the bathroom, gripping the test like it might shatter if I moved too quickly. Thoughts raced through my mind, each more damning than the last. Selena wasn't careless. She was meticulous, always thinking 3 steps ahead. If she had left this test in the trash, it wasn't an accident. Was it a subtle confession? Or was she so confident in her lies that she didn't think I'd find it? I replayed the past few months in my mind, searching for signs I had missed. The late nights at work, the sudden need for space, the way she clutched her phone like it held secrets she couldn't risk me discovering. It all painted a picture I didn't want to see. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. Selena had a way of turning the tables, of making me feel like the bad guy even when she was knee-deep in her own betrayal. I needed a plan, and for that, I needed evidence. As the minutes stretched on in that bathroom, I tried to shake the overwhelming urge to confront Selena right then and there. Every fiber of my being screamed for answers, demanded an explanation. But the logical part of me, the part that had learned to navigate the delicate dance of our strained relationship, knew better. Selena was clever, too clever for her own good. If I stormed out of the bathroom waving that test, she'd twist the narrative until I was left questioning my own sanity. Instead, I took a deep breath and carefully placed the test back where I'd found it. My fingers worked methodically, rearranging the tissues and trash to make it look undisturbed. My heart raced, pounding in my ears as I tried to steady myself. By the time I left the bathroom, my mind was already churning with possibilities. I walked into the kitchen, where Selena was scrolling through her phone, her face a mask of serenity. She sipped her coffee and didn't even glance up as I entered. For a brief moment, I studied her, really studied her. The way her hair fell over her shoulders, the slight furrow in her brow as she read whatever was on her screen. She looked so normal. But that was the thing about Selena. Her greatest strength was her ability to hide the chaos she left in her wake. "Morning," I said, forcing a casual tone as I grabbed a cup of coffee. My voice didn't betray the storm brewing inside me. If she noticed the slight tremor in my hand as I poured the coffee, she didn't show it. "Morning," she replied, her tone light and breezy. "You're up early?" I smiled faintly, though it felt like my face might crack under the strain. "Yeah, figured I'd get a head start on some chores." "Good for you," she said, her eyes never leaving her phone. The lie rolled off my tongue before I could stop it. Over the next few days, I became a shadow in my own home. I watched Selena more closely than ever, paying attention to the little things I had ignored for far too long. The way she always kept her phone face down on the table, as though she was hiding something. The way she seemed more distracted, her laughter a little too forced. It all started to fit into a pattern I couldn't ignore. One morning, as she got ready for work, I noticed something that made my stomach churn. Her phone, which was always within arm's reach, never left her hand, not even when she went to the bathroom. It was a small detail, but one that set my mind racing. What was she hiding? And why did it feel like she was guarding her secrets more fiercely than ever? "You've been on your phone a lot lately," I said casually as I leaned against the kitchen counter, pretending to scroll through my own notifications. "Everything okay?" She froze for a fraction of a second, her fingers hovering over the screen. Then, just as quickly, she laughed and waved me off. "Oh, it's nothing. Just work emails. You know how it is?" Her answer was smooth, almost too smooth, and that's when I knew she was lying. Later that day, after Selena left for work, I decided to take my search deeper. I wasn't proud of what I was about to do, but desperation had a way of erasing the lines of morality. This wasn't about paranoia. This was about survival. If I didn't figure out the truth, it would eat me alive. I started in the place where all secrets eventually surface, the trash. It felt poetic, in a way, to return to the scene of my first discovery. With gloved hands, I sifted through crumpled tissues, old receipts, and empty packaging until I found something that made my heart stop. A receipt from a high-end boutique in the next town over. The date on it was only 2 days ago, and the items listed didn't belong in our house. Luxury candles, silk lingerie, and a bottle of men's cologne. I stared at the receipt for what felt like an eternity, my mind racing to connect the dots. She didn't buy those things for me. That much was clear. So, who were they for? And why had she gone out of her way to hide them? That evening, as we sat on the couch pretending to watch some forgettable reality show, I decided to test her. I waited until she was fully engrossed in her phone, her fingers tapping away at a message I would never see. "So," I began, keeping my tone light and teasing, "who's the cologne for?" Her head snapped up so fast I thought she might get whiplash. For a moment, She just stared at me, her face a mix of confusion and panic. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice sharper than usual. I held up the receipt, letting her see it. "This. From Tuesday. I didn't realize you'd gone shopping." Her mask slipped for just a second. Her eyes widened, and her mouth opened like she was about to say something. But then she recovered, laughing it off. "Oh, that? It's from my boss. His birthday's coming up, and the team pitched in for a gift. I didn't think it was a big deal, so I didn't mention it. It was a good lie. Quick, believable, and just vague enough to discourage follow-up questions. But it wasn't good enough. Not this time. The room felt too small after her explanation, the air heavy with unspoken truths. Selena had always been a quick thinker, able to spin a story that sounded plausible enough to buy her time. But as she turned her attention back to her phone, I could see her fingers moving a little too quickly, her brows furrowing as if she were typing something urgent. Was she warning someone? Covering her tracks? My chest tightened with the realization that every move she made now felt calculated. That night, as she slept soundly beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The receipt burned a hole in my mind, a reminder of the life she was hiding from me. I thought about the cologne, the lingerie, the candles. Each item painted a picture of intimacy, one I wasn't part of. The anger simmered beneath my skin, but I forced myself to stay calm. Selena thought she could outsmart me, that her lies were impenetrable. She didn't know I was already 3 steps ahead. Over the next week, I began piecing together a timeline. I noted the nights she came home late, claiming to be stuck at the office. I paid attention to her habits, how she took extra care with her appearance on certain mornings, how her phone seemed glued to her hand more than ever. I even started tracking her mileage, a trick I picked up from an article about catching cheaters. Her car's odometer told a story that didn't match the one she was telling me. One evening, as she got ready for bed, I noticed her phone lighting up on the nightstand. She quickly grabbed it, the screen tilted away from me. "Work emails," she muttered, not even looking at me. But I caught a glimpse of the notification, a name I didn't recognize, followed by a heart emoji. I wanted to call her out right then and there, but I bit my tongue. I couldn't afford to tip my hand too soon. Instead, I nodded, playing the role of the clueless husband. "Work keeping you busy?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. She sighed, her face a picture of exhaustion. "You have no idea." While she was at work the next day, I decided it was time to dig deeper. Selena wasn't tech-savvy, and her laptop passwords were laughably predictable. Within minutes, I had access to her email. What I found there made my stomach churn. Messages from someone named Ryan filled her inbox. They weren't explicit, but the tone was unmistakable, playful, flirtatious, intimate. One subject line caught my eye. "Last night was perfect." I opened it with trembling hands, my heart racing as I read her words. "I can't stop thinking about you. Let's do it again soon." My breath hitched, and I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't paranoia. This was proof. I decided to follow her the next morning. She left the house dressed to the nines, her perfume lingering in the air long after she walked out the door. Her usual route to work took her downtown, but today, she made an unexpected detour. She parked outside a quaint cafe on the edge of town, one I'd never heard her mention before. My chest tightened as I watched her step out of the car, her heels clicking against the pavement. She wasn't just grabbing coffee. She was meeting someone. I parked a block away, careful to stay out of sight. My heart pounded as I watched her walk inside. Moments later, a man arrived, tall, confident, dressed in business casual attire. He glanced around briefly before stepping inside. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. This was it. The moment the lies came crashing down. From my vantage point, I could see them through the cafe's front window. They sat at a small table in the corner, leaning in close as they talked and laughed. Selena's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his hand. The sight made my stomach churn, but I forced myself to stay calm. Losing my cool now wouldn't get me what I needed. I pulled out my phone and began snapping photos, capturing every damning moment. They stayed there for over an hour, sipping their lattes and sharing a pastry. When they finally left, I followed them at a safe distance. They walked to their cars, parked side by side, and lingered by his driver's side door. He reached out, tucking a strand of her hair behind her ear before leaning in to kiss her cheek. She smiled at him, her eyes filled with a warmth that once belonged to me. I took another photo, my hands shaking with a mix of rage and adrenaline. That evening, Selena came home with takeout in hand, her face alight with what I now recognized as guilt masquerading as cheerfulness. "Thought we could have a nice dinner together," she said, setting the bags on the table. "You've been working so hard lately." Her words felt like acid, burning away any remaining trust. But I smiled, playing the part of the unsuspecting husband. "That's thoughtful of you." "Thanks, Sel." As we ate, I watched her closely, noting every subtle tell. How her eyes darted to her phone, how her laughter felt forced. She thought she was in control, that her lies were safe. She had no idea I was holding the match that would burn her carefully constructed world to the ground. That night, as Selena slept soundly beside me, I sat at the kitchen table, the photos I had taken earlier glaring back at me from my phone. Her smile, the way she leaned into him, the casual intimacy between them, it was all there, captured in damning clarity. My anger simmered beneath the surface, but I forced myself to remain calm. Acting out of rage would only give her an excuse to twist the narrative. I needed to be smarter, colder. I opened my laptop and began creating a timeline. The late nights, the unexplained mileage on her car, the receipt from the boutique. All the pieces were finally falling into place. Each new detail felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. It wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about uncovering the full scope of her lies. I found myself scrolling through her social media accounts, searching for anything I might have missed. Her posts were as polished as ever. Pictures of us smiling at family gatherings, captions about how grateful she was for our life together. The irony made me sick. She had crafted an illusion so perfect. Even I had believed it. But now, that illusion was shattering, and I was determined to expose the truth. The following morning, Selena left for work with her usual breezy goodbye. She kissed me on the cheek, her lips brushing my skin like a ghost of affection. "Have a good day," she said, her voice light and carefree. I watched her walk out the door, her heels clicking against the pavement, and felt a surge of determination. Today would be different. Today, I would dig deeper. Once I was certain she was gone, I pulled her laptop out of its usual spot on the desk. Her passwords were laughably easy to guess. Our anniversary, her mother's birthday. Within minutes, I had access to her emails. What I found there only confirmed my suspicions. Emails from Ryan littered her inbox, their tone casual, but filled with inside jokes and shared secrets. One email in particular caught my eye. The subject line read, "Can't wait for Friday." I clicked it, my stomach churning as I read his words. "I booked the reservation for 7 p.m. Can't wait to see you." I stared at the screen, the weight of his words sinking in. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. Friday came quickly, and with it, the opportunity I'd been waiting for. I knew exactly where Selena would be at 7 p.m., and I wasn't going to let her enjoy it in peace. I arrived at the restaurant a few minutes before their reservation, parking in a spot with a clear view of the entrance. My heart pounded as I watched her car pull into the lot. She stepped out wearing a sleek black dress I had never seen before, her hair perfectly styled. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness. This was the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. Ryan arrived shortly after, his confident stride making my stomach churn. He greeted her with a hug, his hand lingering on her back just a moment too long. They walked into the restaurant together, their laughter echoing faintly in the evening air. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. This wasn't just infidelity. This was a deliberate, calculated betrayal. I followed them inside, keeping a safe distance as the host led them to their table. They sat near the back, tucked away in a corner where they likely thought they wouldn't be seen. I positioned myself at a table with a clear view of them, my heart pounding as I watched their interaction. She leaned in close, her hand brushing his as they spoke. His laughter filled the space, a sound that grated against my nerves. When the waiter approached their table, I saw my chance. I stood up, walking toward them with deliberate steps. Selena didn't notice me until I was standing right next to her. The color drained from her face, her eyes widening in shock. "Having a nice evening?" I asked, my voice calm but laced with steel. Ryan looked up, his confusion quickly turning to unease. Selena opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. For the first time, she seemed truly powerless. The restaurant fell silent as the weight of the confrontation settled over the room. Selena tried to regain her composure, her voice trembling as she said, "It's not what it looks like." I laughed, the sound cold and bitter. "Not what it looks like? Really? So you weren't planning this romantic dinner behind my back?" Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze darting between Selena and me. "Look, man, maybe we should talk about this outside." "No," I interrupted, my tone sharp. "We'll talk about it right here. You don't get to sneak around with my wife and then ask for privacy." Selena's face flushed with embarrassment, her carefully constructed mask crumbling under the weight of the truth. She tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled away. "Don't," I said, my voice low and firm. "You don't get to play the victim here." After leaving the restaurant, I drove home in silence, my mind racing. Selena had tried to explain herself, but her excuses rang hollow. She claimed it was a mistake, a moment of weakness. But the emails, the lies, the months of deception, they told a different story. By the time I reached our driveway, my resolve was set. This wasn't just about ending the marriage. This was about reclaiming my life. The following morning, I woke up early, the events of the previous night replaying in my mind like a broken record. Selena was still asleep when I stepped into the kitchen, her breathing soft and steady from the bedroom. It was hard to believe someone so deceitful could look so peaceful. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the bitterness mirroring the anger that simmered beneath my skin. Today was the day I would gather everything I needed to ensure there was no room for Selena to twist the truth. I started by pulling out the folder I had prepared over the past week. Inside were the photos from the cafe, screenshots of her emails with Ryan, and the receipt from the boutique. Each piece of evidence felt like a victory, proof that I wasn't crazy, that the doubts and suspicions that had plagued me for months were justified. But I needed more, something that would make it impossible for her to deny what she'd done. I opened her laptop again, my fingers flying over the keys as I searched her browser history and recent files. What I found made my stomach churn. Hotel reservations under her name, charged to a credit card I didn't recognize. The dates matched the nights she claimed to be working late. My chest tightened as I clicked through the confirmation emails, the details staring back at me like a cruel joke. I realized I couldn't do this alone. As much as I wanted to handle everything myself, the weight of it all was starting to feel unbearable. I needed someone to talk to, someone who could help me navigate the mess Selena had created. That's when I decided to call my best friend, Marcus. Marcus and I had known each other since college. He was the kind of friend who would drop everything if you needed him, and I knew I could trust him to keep this quiet. When I called, he answered on the first ring. "Hey man," he said, his voice warm but cautious. "What's going on? You sound off." I took a deep breath, the words catching in my throat. "Marcus, I need to talk to you. It's about Selena." There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by a soft sigh. "All right, where are you? I'll come over." When Marcus arrived, I felt a wave of relief. He walked into the house, his gaze immediately locking onto mine. "All right," he said, setting his keys on the counter. "What's going on?" I handed him the folder, my hands trembling as he flipped through its contents. His expression shifted from confusion to anger to disbelief as he took in the photos, the emails, and the receipts. "Jesus, man," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "I had no idea." "Neither did I said bitterly. "Not until a few weeks ago." Marcus sat down at the kitchen table, his brow furrowed in thought. "What are you going to do?" "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "But I need to make sure she can't talk her way out of this. I want everything out in the open." With Marcus's help, I began planning the confrontation. It wasn't enough to catch Selena in a lie. I needed to ensure there was no room for manipulation or excuses. We spent hours going over the evidence, organizing it into a clear timeline that would leave no doubt about what had happened. By the time we were done, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. Marcus clapped me on the shoulder, his expression firm. You've got this, man. She's not going to see it coming. That evening, I sat in the living room, waiting for Selena to come home. My heart pounded as the minutes ticked by, each second bringing me closer to the moment I'd been dreading. When I heard her car pull into the driveway, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was about to happen. She walked through the door, her smile faltering slightly when she saw me sitting there, the folder on the coffee table in front of me. "Hey," she said cautiously. "What's going on?" "Sit down," I said, my voice calm but firm. "We need to talk." Selena hesitated, her eyes darting to the folder before she sat down. "What is this?" she asked, her tone defensive. I opened the folder and slid it across the table to her. "This is everything," I said simply. "The photos, the emails, the hotel reservations. Don't bother denying it. I already know." Her face went pale as she flipped through the contents, her hands trembling. "I can explain," she began, but I cut her off. "Don't," I said sharply. "I've heard enough lies. I want the truth. All of it." At first, she tried to deflect, claiming it wasn't what it looked like, that I had misunderstood. But as I pressed her, her defenses began to crumble. Finally, she broke down, tears streaming down her face as she admitted to the affair. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she sobbed. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Her words felt hollow, a desperate attempt to salvage what little dignity she had left. But I wasn't interested in her excuses. "You made your choices," I said coldly, "and now you have to live with them." The days after Selena's confession were surreal. She packed a small bag that night and left without a word about where she was going. The silence in the house was deafening, a stark contrast to the chaos of the confrontation. For the first time in years, I was alone with my thoughts, and they were relentless. Friends and family started calling, some out of concern, others out of curiosity. Word traveled quickly in our social circle, though I wasn't sure how much Selena had told anyone. I kept my answers brief, unwilling to let others influence how I handled the fallout. This wasn't about public perception. It was about regaining control of my life. A few days later, I received a text from Selena. "Can we talk?" The simplicity of the message made my blood boil. After everything she had done, after the lies and betrayal, she thought we could just talk. I deleted the message without responding, knowing there was nothing left to say. I wasn't content to let Ryan walk away from this unscathed. He was just as culpable as Selena, and I knew he had his own life that was ripe for disruption. It didn't take long to find his wife's social media profile, a picture-perfect showcase of their suburban life. Christine, her name was, and she deserved to know the truth. I spent hours composing an email to her. I attached the photos of Selena and Ryan at the cafe, the screenshots of their emails, and the hotel reservation confirmations. The message was concise, devoid of any embellishments or malice. I wasn't doing this out of spite. I was doing it because she had a right to know. When I finally hit send, a strange sense of calm washed over me. I had done my part. Whatever came next was out of my hands. It didn't take long for the fallout to reach Ryan. A few days after sending the email, I received a message from Christine. Her words were raw, filled with shock and gratitude. She thanked me for telling her the truth and assured me she would take action. Her strength in the face of betrayal was inspiring, and it gave me a renewed sense of purpose. Ryan, on the other hand, wasn't as composed. He called me the next day, his voice dripping with anger and desperation. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he barked. "You had no right to do that." I laughed, the sound cold and humorless. "No right? You slept with my wife, lied to your own, and you think I don't have the right to tell the truth? Spare me, Ryan." His attempts to intimidate me fell flat. I hung up on him, knowing he was scrambling to salvage what little he had left. With Selena and Ryan out of my life, I finally had the space to focus on myself. The house, once a symbol of our crumbling marriage, became my sanctuary. I spent days cleaning, rearranging furniture, and throwing out anything that reminded me of her. Each act felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I picked up old hobbies I had abandoned during our relationship. My guitar, dusty from years of neglect, became a lifeline. I played for hours, losing myself in the music. I also started running again, the steady rhythm of my feet on the pavement clearing my mind in ways I hadn't experienced in years. Friends I had lost touch with began reaching out, offering their support. I accepted their invitations for coffee, dinners, and drinks, slowly rebuilding a social life that wasn't tied to Selena. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. Months passed, and the pain of Selena's betrayal began to dull. It didn't disappear entirely. It left scars, faint reminders of the life I had once lived. But those scars didn't define me. They were proof of my resilience, of my ability to survive and thrive in the face of adversity. Selena tried reaching out a few more times, her messages filled with apologies and pleas for forgiveness. I never responded. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. Ryan's life, too, had crumbled under the weight of his actions. Christine divorced him, airing their dirty laundry for all to see. He lost his job, his reputation, and the life he had built on lies. As for me, I found peace in the little things. Quiet mornings with a cup of coffee on the porch. The satisfaction of a well-cooked meal. The freedom to live life on my own terms. I wasn't the same person I had been when this all began. I was stronger, wiser, and more aware of my worth. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Betrayal doesn't have to break you. It can rebuild you, strip away the illusions, and force you to confront the truth about who you are and what you deserve. And for anyone facing the kind of pain I endured, I have only one piece of advice. Don't settle. Don't let anyone convince you that you're less than you are. Rise above it, because there's nothing more satisfying than watching the people who try to tear you down crumble under the weight of their own lies, while you rise. And rise I did. What if Jonah and Elise had arrived a little earlier? Or maybe if they had decided to delay their entrance by just half an hour? It's hard not to imagine how drastically different everything might have turned out. Yet, here I was, watching a man like a hawk from across the room, my stomach churning with equal parts anger and purpose. Elliot, the man at the center of my attention, moved through the crowd with an unsettling grace. His demeanor was calculated, his eyes sharp and observant, scanning the room as if he were a predator selecting his prey. His body language was fluid, almost magnetic, as though he knew how to manipulate the atmosphere around him. My pulse quickened as I watched him focus on a couple seated a few tables away. The man was obliviously chatting, laughing over his drink, while the woman occasionally glanced around nervously, playing with the edge of her napkin. I already knew how this would play out if I didn't intervene. I didn't need confirmation to know what Elliot was planning. His type was easy to spot once you had the misfortune of falling victim to them. Months ago, he'd torn my life apart, reducing everything I held dear to ashes. Tonight wasn't about revenge. It was about closure, justice, prevention, maybe all three. Sliding through the crowd, I matched his movements, careful to stay just outside his periphery. My heart raced as the memories came flooding back, of how he'd lured my wife away from me, of the humiliation I'd felt in front of my children. The devastation that followed had been a slow poison, eroding my family and everything I had worked for. I tightened my fists, willing the memories to fuel my resolve. Tonight, Elliot wouldn't ruin another family. "Hey," I said sharply, stepping directly into his path. My voice was calm, but carried an undertone that I knew he couldn't ignore. Elliot paused, his confident smirk faltering as he looked at me. For a moment, I wondered if he recognized me. But no, I was just another faceless casualty to him, a statistic in his game. "Do I know you?" he asked, his voice dripping with false politeness. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You don't remember me, do you?" "Of course, why would you? People like you don't bother remembering the damage you cause." His confusion turned to discomfort, and for the first time, I saw a crack in his composed facade. He didn't respond, so I pressed on. 8 months ago, a party like this, you danced with my wife. Told her she deserved better than a boring husband. Does that jog your memory?" The surrounding tables began to quiet down as heads turned toward us. Elliot's eyes darted nervously around the room, his mask of confidence slipping further. "Look, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me." My voice rose, and I stepped closer, forcing him to look me in the eye. "You knew she was married. You didn't care. You never care, do you? All you see are opportunities. The room had gone almost completely silent now, with whispers spreading like wildfire. People were craning their necks to catch a glimpse of the unfolding drama. I could feel the weight of their stares, but it only fueled my determination. Elliot tried to step back, but I matched his movement, keeping the distance between us uncomfortably close. "You're going to listen to me," I said, my voice low but firm. "For once, you're going to hear what it's like on the other side of your little games." Elliot raised his hands, palms out, as if to calm me. "Look, man, I'm sorry if something happened." "Don't," I snapped, cutting him off. "Don't you dare apologize to me like it means anything. Do you even understand what you've done? Do you know what it's like to tell your kids their mom's not coming home because someone like you tore their family apart?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. Elliot's expression was carefully neutral now, but I could see the discomfort in his eyes. He wasn't used to being confronted like this, especially not in public. For a moment, I thought he might lash out or try to turn the situation around, but he stayed quiet. I glanced at my watch, calculating how much time I had left. Everything had to go according to plan. The police were already on their way, and I needed to make sure Elliot didn't slip away before they arrived. Reaching into my jacket, I pulled out the object that had been weighing on me all evening, a Glock 19. A collective gasp spread through the room, and several people scrambled to back away. Elliot froze, his eyes widening as he stared at the gun. For the first time, I saw real fear in his expression. "Sit down," I ordered, gesturing to the nearest chair. Elliot hesitated, glancing around as if searching for an escape. I leveled the gun at him, my hand steady. I said, "Sit down." Slowly, he lowered himself into the chair, his hands gripping the edges of the seat. The air was thick with tension, the kind that made every second feel like an eternity. I could hear the distant wail of sirens approaching, but they were still a few minutes away. Just enough time. I kept my gaze locked on Elliot as the room held its collective breath. Every eye was on us. Every phone was pointed in our direction. The whispers had ceased, replaced by a tense, oppressive silence. This was what I wanted: witnesses, proof, a moment of clarity for everyone to see Elliot for what he truly was. "You thrive on humiliation, don't you?" I said, my voice loud enough for the crowd to hear. "You target people like me, husbands, fathers. You go after their wives, destroy their families, and then walk away like it's nothing. But not tonight." Elliot's lips pressed into a thin line, his fear barely concealed under a veneer of defiance. "Look, I don't know what you think I've done, but this isn't the way to handle it." "Oh, it's exactly the way to handle it," I shot back. "You see, Elliot, people like you rely on the shadows. You operate quietly, discreetly. But here, in the open, with everyone watching, you can't hide." The sirens grew louder, but I ignored them. This moment wasn't about them. It was about me and the wreckage Elliot had left in his wake. I gestured toward the blonde woman seated nearby, her husband now standing protectively in front of her. "You see her?" I said, pointing with my free hand. "She's next on your list, isn't she? You've already decided she's vulnerable, that she'll fall for whatever lines you feed her. But not tonight." The blonde woman's husband, clearly shaken, glanced between me and Elliot, unsure of what to do. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice trembling. Elliot's mask cracked further, panic flickering across his face. "Don't listen to him," he said quickly. "He's making this up." "Am I?" I said, my tone sharp. "Do you really think this is some elaborate lie? Ask your wife. Ask her how many times Elliot's glanced her way tonight. Ask her what he said when you went to the bar." The man turned to his wife, his expression a mix of confusion and hurt. She opened her mouth to respond but faltered, her cheeks flushing with guilt. That was all the confirmation he needed. "You bastard," the husband muttered, stepping toward Elliot, his fists clenched. Hey, I interjected, holding up a hand. "Not yet. Let him squirm a little longer." Elliot shifted in his seat, his confidence eroding under the weight of the crowd's judgment. I could see it in his eyes, the realization that his usual tactics wouldn't save him this time. The sirens outside were deafening now, and moments later, the doors burst open. Uniformed officers poured into the room, their weapons drawn, shouting commands. I slowly raised my hands, keeping the Glock pointed downward as I stepped back from Elliot. "I'm the one you're looking for," I announced, my voice calm. I'm unarmed now. The gun's on the table. The officers hesitated, scanning the room before one of them approached cautiously. He picked up the gun, inspecting it before motioning for another officer to handcuff me. I didn't resist as they secured my wrists, their grip firm, but not rough. Elliot, still seated, looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. The officers turned to him, their expressions hard. "Are you pressing charges?" one of them asked. Elliot hesitated, clearly weighing his options. If he pressed charges, the entire story would come out, the videos, the affairs, the lives he'd ruined. He shook his head. "No," he muttered. "Just get him out of here." A month later, I found myself standing in a courtroom, my lawyer beside me. The prosecutor painted me as a dangerous vigilante, someone who had taken the law into their own hands. I couldn't argue with that. I had. But my lawyer fought back, arguing for leniency. He presented evidence of Elliot's pattern of behavior, the dozens of families he'd destroyed, the testimonies of his victims. By the end of the trial, the jury was visibly conflicted. When the verdict came down, guilty, with a sentence of 5 to 8 years, I accepted it without complaint. I'd known from the start that there would be consequences for my actions, and I was prepared to face them. Prison was exactly as I'd expected, grim, monotonous, and full of men who had little to lose. But word of why I was there spread quickly, and to my surprise, it earned me a strange sort of respect. Inmates who had nothing in common with me would nod in acknowledgement as I passed, their silent approval a small comfort in an otherwise bleak existence. I kept my head down, avoided trouble, and counted the days until my parole hearings began. Every year, Elliot would show up, leaning heavily on his cane, his hatred for me written all over his face. And every year, his testimony ensured I stayed behind bars. In my 5th year, Elliot didn't show up. No cane, no smug expression, no venomous words. I didn't know why, and I didn't ask. Without him there, the board granted my parole, and I walked out of prison a free man. Walking out of the prison gates felt surreal. The air was crisp, the sun brighter than I remembered. Freedom tasted bittersweet. I had no family waiting for me, no home to return to. My ex-wife had remarried, and my kids, now teenagers, likely remembered me more as the man who was arrested than the father who once tucked them in at night. Still, there was one thing I knew I had to do: start over. The world wasn't going to hand me a second chance, but I was determined to create one. I secured a bed at a halfway house and began the slow process of piecing my life back together. 2 days after my release, I received a call from an unknown number. The man on the other end introduced himself as Leo, a small business owner who'd heard about my story. "I run a logistics company," he said. "I'm willing to give you a job, no questions asked. You'll need training, but if you're serious about rebuilding, I can help." Skeptical but desperate, I agreed. A meeting was arranged at a local diner, where Leo and his business partner, Alan, waited for me. They were older men, each with the weary look of people who had seen their share of hardship. But their smiles were warm, and their offer genuine. Over coffee, Leo explained why he had reached out. "You did what a lot of us only dreamed of doing," he said. "Alan and we've been in your shoes. Elliot destroyed our families, too." My breath caught. "You knew him?" Alan nodded grimly. "Our wives fell into his trap years ago. We lost everything, our marriages, our peace of mind. When we saw your story on the news, we couldn't look away. You had the courage to do what we couldn't." Their words hit me like a freight train. I'd thought my pain was singular, that my story was unique. But here were 2 men who understood exactly what I had been through. Leo and Alan didn't just offer me a job. They offered me a lifeline. They trained me in logistics, teaching me everything from inventory management to truck maintenance. The work was grueling, but it was honest, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had a purpose. In time, I found a small apartment through one of Alan's contacts. It wasn't much, just a single room with peeling wallpaper and a leaky faucet, but it was mine. For the first time since my arrest, I felt a flicker of hope. Months into my new job, I received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the signature at the bottom sent a chill down my spine. Elliot. The contents were cryptic, an invitation to meet at a local park. Against my better judgment, I went. When I arrived, I found him seated on a bench, his cane resting beside him. He looked older, more weathered, but his eyes still held that infuriating spark of arrogance. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my distance. "I wanted to see you," he replied, his voice calm. "To understand why you did it." His question stunned me. "You don't get it, do you? You ruined lives, mine, Leo's, Alan's, dozens of others. And you think this is about understanding?" He leaned back, a smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. "People like me don't change, you know. But people like you? You're fascinating. You think you're the hero of this story, but you're just as broken as the rest of us." Elliot's words echoed in my mind long after I left the park. I hated that he had a point, hated that his presence could still unnerve me. But his smugness had lit a fire in me, a determination to prove him wrong, to build a life that couldn't be touched by the likes of him. Weeks later, I learned through Leo that Elliot had taken his own life. The news was shocking, but I couldn't muster sadness. His death felt like the final chapter of a long and painful book. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. With Elliot gone, I found myself thinking more about my kids. I hadn't seen them in years, but Leo encouraged me to reach out. "They deserve to know you tried," he said. Writing the letter was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. I poured my heart into it, explaining everything. My mistakes, my regrets, my hope for a second chance. Weeks passed without a response, but then, one day, a letter arrived. The letter was from my son, Nathan. He was cautious, unsure if he wanted to meet, but his words held a glimmer of curiosity. I wrote back immediately, starting a correspondence that became the highlight of my days. Over time, Nathan opened up, and eventually, he agreed to meet. Seeing Nathan in person was overwhelming. He had grown so much, taller, more confident, but his eyes held the same warmth I remembered. We talked for hours, catching up on years we had lost. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Nathan and I continued meeting in the months that followed, slowly rebuilding a relationship I feared was lost forever. At first, our conversations were hesitant, guarded. He asked questions about my time in prison, about what led to that fateful night with Elliot. I answered honestly, even when it hurt, determined not to sugarcoat the truth. "I hated you for a long time," he admitted one evening as we sat on a park bench. "I didn't understand why you'd throw everything away. But now, I get it. You were protecting us, in a way." His words left me speechless. I had never thought of my actions as anything other than a reaction to my own pain. But hearing Nathan's perspective gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, I had done something right. Nathan eventually brought his twin sister, Natalie, into our meetings. Unlike her brother, she was more skeptical, her anger simmering just below the surface. "Why now?" she asked during our first meeting, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Why did it take you so long to reach out?" Her question hit me like a punch to the gut, but I didn't shy away. "Because I was scared," I admitted. "Scared that you wouldn't want me in your life. Scared that I'd already done too much damage. But I'm here now, and I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." It wasn't an instant fix, but over time, Natalie began to soften. She saw the effort I was making, the sincerity in my words, and while our relationship was far from perfect, it was a start. One night, I found myself thinking about my ex-wife, Emily. I had avoided contacting her, respecting the boundaries she had set years ago, but my conversations with Nathan and Natalie had stirred memories I couldn't ignore. I wondered if she was happy, if she ever thought about the life we had built before everything fell apart. Leo, ever the pragmatist, offered his perspective over a late-night drink. "You've made peace with Elliot," he said. "Maybe it's time to make peace with her, too." It wasn't a simple decision, but after weeks of deliberation, I decided to write her a letter. I didn't ask for anything. No meetings, no reconciliation, just an acknowledgement of the mistakes we had both made and a wish for her happiness. To my surprise, Emily responded. Her letter was cautious but kind, filled with updates about her life and our children. She wrote about her new husband, who she described as patient and supportive, and about the challenges of co-parenting after our divorce. "I won't pretend that what happened didn't hurt," she wrote. "But I've seen the changes in Nathan and Natalie since they started talking to you. They're happier, more grounded. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Her words were a balm I hadn't realized I needed. For the first time, I felt a sense of closure with Emily, a sense that while we could never go back to what we were, we had both found a way forward. With my relationships slowly mending, I began to think about the future. My work with Leo and Alan had given me stability, but I wanted something more. Inspired by the stories I had heard from other victims of people like Elliot, I decided to start a support group. It was a modest idea at first, just a handful of men and women gathering to share their experiences. But it quickly grew into something much larger. Within months, the group had expanded, drawing people from all walks of life who had been impacted by betrayal and loss. We offered resources, counseling, and most importantly, a sense of community. For the first time in years, I felt like I was making a real difference. The group's success didn't go unnoticed. Local media picked up on the story, and soon I was being invited to speak at events and conferences. It was surreal, standing in front of crowds and sharing my journey, but it was also incredibly fulfilling. I wasn't just helping others, I was helping myself too. Through the group, I met people who had experienced pain far greater than mine. Their resilience inspired me, pushing me to keep going even when I felt overwhelmed. Each story reminded me that while I couldn't change the past, I could still create something meaningful in the present. Nathan and Natalie began attending some of the group's events, their presence a quiet show of support. Seeing them there, surrounded by people who understood our shared pain, filled me with a pride I couldn't put into words. One evening, after an especially moving session, Natalie approached me with tears in her eyes. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she said softly. "I don't think I ever said that before, but I am." Her words were a gift I hadn't expected, and they stayed with me long after the event ended. As the years passed, my life began to take on a sense of normalcy. The support group continued to grow, and my work with Leo and Alan flourished. I even started dating again, cautiously opening myself up to the possibility of love. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Nathan and Natalie became fixtures in my life, their visits a source of constant joy. We weren't the family we had once been, but we were something new, something stronger. Looking back, I often thought about Elliot, not with anger but with a strange sense of gratitude. His actions had nearly destroyed me, but they had also forced me to confront the darkest parts of myself. In doing so, I had found a strength I didn't know I possessed. The support group became my legacy, a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of community. Through it, I had turned my pain into something meaningful, something that could help others navigate their own struggles. On the 10th anniversary of my release from prison, I stood before a packed room at a conference, sharing my story for what felt like the 100th time. As I spoke, I saw Nathan and Natalie sitting in the front row, their faces filled with pride. Emily was there, too, her smile a quiet reminder of how far we had all come. When I finished, the crowd rose to their feet, their applause echoing through the room. I stepped back, letting the moment wash over me. And for the first time in years, I felt truly whole. The journey had been long, painful, and filled with countless challenges, but it had led me here, to a life rebuilt, relationships mended, and a purpose that gave everyday meaning. And in that moment I knew I had finally found peace.